on today's StoryBeat.
It's always good still to go to various events, conventions, and things like that. As great as it is to have, obviously, social media and the internet and everything nowadays to broaden your work and get it seen more, to make eye contact with a potential employer, collaborator, is infinitely better than some random email, social media post, or whatever it might be.
This is StoryBeat with Steve Cuden, a podcast for the creative mind. StoryBeat explores how masters of creativity develop and produce brilliant works that people everywhere love and admire. So join us as we discover how talented creators find success in the worlds of imagination and entertainment. Here now is your host, Steve Cuden.
Thanks for joining us on StoryBeat. We're coming to you from the Steel City, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Well, my guest today, Charlie Adlard, has been a veteran of the comics industry for over 25 years. From 2003 to 2019, he spent the majority of his time drawing The Walking Dead through its conclusion as a comic book series. He received many industry awards for his work on the series, culminating in winning the 2019 Sergio Aragonés International Award for Excellence in Comic Art. In his time as a cartoonist, Charlie has worked on many other projects as far-reaching as Mars Attacks, The X-Files, Judge Dredd, Savage, Batman, X-Men, and Superman. He's also drawn many creator-owned projects closer to his heart, like Astronauts in Trouble, Breath of the Wendigo, Codeflesh, Rock Bottom, Vampire State Building, White Death, Damn Them All, Heretic, and Altamont. So for all those reasons and many more, I'm deeply honored and truly thrilled to have one of the greatest cartoonists ever, Charlie Adlard, join me on StoryBeat today. Charlie, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Steve. That was amazing. Thank you. I feel very. My ego has been buoyed now nicely. Thank you.
Well, we'll try to keep buoying it as we go. So let's go back in time just a little bit to where all this began. Am I right that you started out initially wanting to be a filmmaker? Is that correct?
Not wholly correct. A bit of it, yeah. I mean, that's what I did at art college, and that's kind of what I tried to do very briefly afterwards. But from the age of about 6 up till about 18, all I wanted to do was be a comic book artist.
Okay, good. And so you were about 6 when you first got into it. What was it that brought your attention to it in the first place?
Two things, really. And they are kind of some of my earliest memories. One was I was very lucky because my dad was instrumental in both these things, but my dad owned a few shops, one of which was a newsagent. And one day he came home with something behind his back, which was a copy of Mighty World of Marvel #1, which was the British reprint, obviously. This is back in 1972. This was the British reprint of, obviously, the classic Marvel comics. And it was anthologized like all great British comics were at the time. So very different format to, obviously, American comic books. And within the pages was Spider-Man, Incredible Hulk, and the Fantastic Four. I remember gravitating at the time mainly to the Fantastic Four because even at 6, I was a bit of a sci-fi nut, I think. So obviously that was, it wasn't the horror of the Hulk or the sort of teenage angst of Spider-Man. This was, kind of as hardcore sci-fi as Marvel could probably get at the time. So I remember really loving that. And I think I was drawing before that as a young kid, but of course, unfocused. And I think post that, all I drew were comics and genre stuff. And also at the same time, my dad used to go and fill up at this gas station. And they were running a promotion at this petrol station we were filling up at. And once you got a certain amount of points, you could get a free Asterix book.
Okay.
And I remember the four you could get. You could get Asterix the Gaul, Asterix the Gladiator, Asterix the Legionnaire, and Asterix in the Big Fight. And I absolutely devoured those. I used to pester my dad to constantly go to this petrol station to keep filling up so I could get these books. So I didn't realize at the time, as a 6-year-old, I was being fed American comic books on one side, and of course, as we call them, French bande dessinée. Obviously, I didn't realize that was what it was then. On the other.
Did you start to imitate those styles by drawing what they were doing?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I remember mainly drawing sort of superhero stuff, but I do remember trying to imitate, say Uderzo's drawings for Asterix. And I also remember, when I was pretty young, trying to imitate Schultz's stuff for Peanuts as well, trying to capture what he could do in 3 lines. And I think at that early age, I probably learned how less is more with cartooning.
Well, isn't it amazing that that's really challenging to do a 4-panel comic or a 1-panel comic and make it impactful? That's really hard to do.
Oh, absolutely. And I think someone especially like Schultz was sort of teaching me that because, I couldn't draw Snoopy, I couldn't draw Charlie Brown, but to my young brain, it was like, why can't I do this? Because it's just a couple of lines. I can do a couple of lines, look. And it never looked, obviously it just never looked as good. And, you kind of realize that my young brain was sort of working out that's the skill of a brilliant cartoonist is to do something that good in as little, sort of mark making as possible.
Do you think of yourself as a cartoonist or graphic illustrator? Do you have a specific thought in your head as to what you refer to yourself as? Is it cartoonist?
Yeah, I always call myself a cartoonist because I believe we all cartoon. It's as simple as that.
Mm-hmm.
Going back to Schultz again, it's like he just does it to more of an extreme than I do. I'm obviously more based in the reality side of it, and Schultz is kind of the other side of it, which is almost based in the kind of I don't know what you call it, the surreal. Can't even say the word.
It's more fantasy and childlike. Yours is much more realistic and natural and impactful as an adult, and his is more, I think, more impactful on a little kid, small children.
First impressions, yes, and then you realize how mature.
It's way beyond as an adult to go back and look at Peanuts. That's for sure. Do you know if it was Schultz? Was that what got you to go forward, or it was really going back to Asterix and the Marvel comics? Is that what did it?
I think it was the first two. Definitely were the big influences. Kind of like what you said as a kid, I just gravitated towards stuff like Peanuts just because of its childlike, the things that attract you as a child. It's simple as that sort of simplistic cartooning.
Did you realize early on that it was all about really storytelling more than just images?
No, not when I was a kid. That's probably why it was easier to, I suppose, for want of a better word, accept Marvel comics or Asterix even, because even though Asterix is that sort of classic cartooning, I mean, what that was doing was imposing, which is a very classic sort of French way, is imposing sort of cartoony figures in highly realistic backgrounds.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of, which I appreciated because that's how I liked, how I watched Disney cartoons or things like that, but the background's beautifully watercolor painted. So it had that kind of impact. Again, but Asterix especially, I mean, I still read Asterix. I mean, I have every single Asterix book. I'm a massive Asterix fan.
Wow.
And, I even have the ones that Goscinny, after Goscinny died, Uderzo took over and did some really good ones. And then when he got older, they weren't so good. And I still have those. And, now there's a new creative team and, they're getting better. So yeah, I'm still in there with our Gaulish friend.
And on the American side too, because that's real, I think that's very fascinating. Of course, you grew up in England, so your influence would be from that perspective for sure. But you were also being influenced by American authors and artists as well. Who were you looking at that point? Was it the Jack Kirbys and the Steve Ditkos of the world? Is that who you admired?
Well, I mean, I can't deny their influence because that's who, again, as a 6-year-old, that's what I was reading. Yeah, I didn't know who these people were at the time. The first artist I remember seeing and kind of thinking, oh, I like this artist's work. I need to seek out more of this artist was back in the UK. And I wasn't reading American comic books in their actual American comic book form probably until I left school.
Hmm.
But up until then, so I was getting into my sort of late teens before I really started reading the proper source material stuff. So it was all Marvel UK. I mean, and like I say, Marvel UK were canny enough to produce this stuff for the UK market, whereas DC weren't. So I'm not as familiar with the DC stuff purely because I didn't read any DC up until I was probably in my 20s.
Really? So you were only really looking at Marvel until you were in your 20s then?
Yeah, I mean, I was obviously aware of DC Comics and I was aware of the characters and things, but Marvel produced stuff for the UK. It's as simple as that. It was I think, a really clever business decision at the time. But of course, everything was anthologized, as I said before, because that was, the kind of the way comics were accepted over in the UK. So, but what I was going to say was, obviously, back in 1978. Star Wars Weekly came out, obviously serializing all the Star Wars comics. But in the backup, they had a strip called The Micronauts, which was based on the toy series at the time. But the artist was a guy called Michael Golden. And he's the first artist I actually sort of, I suppose, inverted commas, noticed. Primarily because the UK comics were produced cheaply, so most of them were mainly black and white. And Golden's artwork stuck out because he was a brilliant black and white artist. He used strong blacks, nice contrast, that sort of chiaroscuro effect and everything. So, yeah, I just remember just absolutely lapping the Micronauts up and looking for this one particular artist afterwards, and that was probably my first artist that I got into. Definitely.
You bring up the black and white, and we're going to get more to The Walking Dead in a little bit. But most of or all of The Walking Dead that you drew was black and white, correct?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
so it's shadows and light and positive and negative imagery and all the rest of it. Why black and white? What does that do? What does that do for the reader, for the viewer?
I mean, I don't know why I gravitated to that more than sort of line art. Because it could be going back, like I say, originally to reading all these comics when I was young, because they were all printed in black and white. And if you saw Kirby's stuff or Ditko's stuff or John Buscema's stuff or whatever, it was great, but it was a bit very open because there was no color in it. Whereas, like I say, somebody like Golden comes along when he does these strong blacks, you kind of go, oh, this works on the page. So I don't know why I fell in love with that sort of strong contrast sort of artwork, but there's a lot of artists out there, that I really admire that are really strong with that kind of effect.
That's your preference to draw is black and white, I assume. Yes.
It was. I mean, I've recently I've done a lot more color work, and you have to temper your style obviously a bit to accommodate that.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I mean, I'm very lucky because I'm probably one of the very, very few artists that have worked for the American industry that's made a decent living out of drawing comics that haven't been colored, because the general perception, especially in American comic books, is it's not going to sell unless it's in color. So we slightly disproved them wrong with The Walking Dead.
Well, slightly. I mean, it's a massive hit. It was a massive number one hit for quite a long time. And then, of course, the TV series and virtual spin-offs from the first series have been gigantic, especially for American audiences and around the world. I'm going to ask you a question I ask lots of guests. Frequently, it's about story, but in this case, I'm going to ask you about imagery. What for you makes a great image great?
Ooh. An eye for design. That's what I'd say. You know, over the years, I've sort of really come to appreciate design in any art form. You know, there's a lot of comic book artists rely on, obviously, you know, the impact that, especially in American comic books, it's that big sort of splash of action or whatever. You know, it's fine. I'm perfectly happy with people that gravitate towards that. But for me, a great cover doesn't have to be something that's taken, you know, days to draw. You know, it's just that some image that just works.
Well, there are certainly lots of images that are kind of, and you have a lot of them in your work where it's kind of raw feeling. It doesn't feel overly refined. And I think that there's an energy in that that's very attractive. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, sort of. I mean, I always cite an example of an artist that I absolutely adore. And he's not a comic book artist at all, but I love the work of Saul Bass.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, the great movie
Titles,
film poster designer.
Yeah.
And he just had that ability to take an image and break it down to its such utter simple components, especially in a period in the sort of the late 50s, early 60s, when he was doing all the, you know, the Hitchcock stuff and everything.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
You look at it and just go, wow, this is just so different to everything else. And he's created such iconic imagery. And I think a problem a lot of us, especially comic book artists and illustrators, have is trying to cope with the sort of thing of, if you're doing a cover and it takes, say, half a day to do, but it's a great design, you always feel like you need to overwork it because you don't feel you're justified in the cost of what you're being paid over the time taken. But I can't remember who said it, but somebody said at some point, you know, it's not the time it takes to do an image, because it's that 30 years of learning how to get to that.
That's exactly right. Well, it took Einstein quite some time to come up with E equals MC squared. I mean, it's a very simple formula, but it's the entire universe, basically.
Yeah.
And you can look at the work of, for instance, Fred Astaire in movies. It took him hours and hours and hours and hours of practice to get it to look like it was effortless. And that's what I think is ingenious. The genius is to make it look like you just tossed it off.
It was the genius to make it look like anyone could do it.
Right,
I mean,
exactly.
that's literally going back to Peanuts again, isn't it?
It is.
Schultz, he makes it look like, oh, that's just a couple of lines. That's really easy. And it's probably makes it more relatable then, because people do think, oh, I could draw that, you know. And it's instantly iconic as well, of course.
And all you have to do is say, go ahead, draw it, see if you can do it. And of course, most people can't.
And then you can't.
What do you do in your mind's eye to take, I guess, other people's words, or unless you create a story, and turn that into a story in a panel or several panels? How do you interpret the words into a visual story? Because that's what you're doing.
Yeah, it's one of those questions that's really hard to answer, because I just do it. You know,
it's natural for you.
Yeah, I mean, I am one of the world's most uncoordinated people.
Really?
You know, give me a ball and I can't kick it.
Really?
I can guarantee you that. It's like asking a footballer, how do you kick a ball or whatever? And for me, it's magic, but for the footballer, it's just the most natural thing in the world. So I can't understand how somebody can't do what I can do, because I just
I tell
do
you
it.
what, I can't.
But we've all got hands. We all can move the same way. Do you know what I mean?
I do. I
It,
do.
it's one of those really, really odd things. So I just see, as soon as I get a script, I just see the imagery in my head. I do sort of treat it like a movie. I see it kind of like a movie,
Mhm.
and that's how I get the storytelling right. Is it, you sort of just think, well, how would it look visually? How would it look? How would it work? And I just sort of see the stages that the script tells me is happening. And some scripts are highly detailed. Some scripts, like Robert's script for The Walking Dead, were not detailed at all. But you worked for 16 years with somebody, you're going to use a lot of shorthand.
Of
But
course.
yeah, I just saw it. That's all I can say.
So it's you're seeing the script come alive in your mind's eye, and the visual imagery is in your mind. Yes.
Pretty much, yeah. I mean, people always say, "Oh, how do you work from the blank page?" And go, "Well, I haven't got a blank page, have I? I've got a script. I have the inspiration. That's my jumping off point." I would struggle to be a fine artist, and I always say the only difference between a fine artist and an illustrator is a fine artist can go in their studio and just literally just go, "Oh, what can I do today?" and just literally start to paint, sculpt, whatever. Whereas an illustrator, exactly the same level of talent, skill, whatever, but we need some impetus, we need some inspiration, we need a project, basically. I mean, a good example is when I was a few years back, I was doing life drawing quite regularly with another comic artist friend.
And there are beautiful examples of that on your website. Absolutely
Oh,
wonderful
thank you,
examples.
thank you. Yeah, well, I kept going back for at least at least 3 or 4 years, primarily because after about the second or third time going there, I suddenly thought, "Oh, I can get a book out of this," and that kept me going back. A project, you see, I
Mhm.
turned it into a project, and yeah, I did. I did a very small run of a life drawing book, and Vanity Publishing, 101. This is, but yeah, I did it, but the crazy thing is, as soon as I did the book, I haven't been back again.
You got it out of your system.
Kind of, yeah, yeah, exactly.
So your work, I think, is a form of fine art, believe it or not. That's just the way I see it. But that's my admiration for what it is you do. Now, I think that your work is light years ahead of what we would think of in movies as a storyboard. But you're kind of making storyboards as a comic book. Isn't that true?
Yeah, yeah. So, I mean, doing storyboards is incredible. I mean, I've never done them per se, but I think doing storyboards, there's less left to your imagination between the panels.
Mm-hmm.
Everything is, boom, this happens, this has to happen, this has to happen,
Right.
this.
Specific.
Whereas, yeah, I think comic books, you do have to have an element of learning how to read them. It's as simple as that. I don't think with storyboards you don't.
So you raise a really great question for me, which is how do you, and again, you're going to say you do it naturally, but there has to be a decision-making process to add a panel and to add an image, but to leave something out so that it is for the reader's imagination. How do you make that
Hmm.
decision? Is it just what you're seeing in your head and that's it? Or is there a decision-making process?
Well, there was a bit of both. It's what I'm seeing in my head, but obviously my mind has made up that decision. Yeah, I've always been the first idea is generally the best idea. The one that comes naturally, like that, is the one I tend to go with.
Hmm.
So there's not much procrastination.
And there can't be in your business. You have to move, don't you?
Back in the old days, I did. It's a bit more relaxed nowadays, but yeah. Well, absolutely, yeah. You really had to move fast as well. It's not an industry for mulling over your work and
No.
constantly refining it, because there just isn't the time to do something like that.
So I come at I come at all of this from a similar but different perspective entirely, which is I've written 90 cartoons for kids, animation. I've written 90 animation scripts, and you have to work very fast in that industry too. There, you can't dawdle and dwell. You have to churn it out because it's for TV. So it has that similar thing. And I too see the story in my mind's eye, like you do, but I then am always surprised by what the artists do with my words.
Right.
Are you ever surprised by how people come back and interpret your work to you?
Well, I mean, a lot of writers that I've worked with, obviously in the past, have all said what a great job it is as a writer, because it's so great to see their ideas visualized,
Mm-hmm.
and it's always an excitement. It's always a kind of a thrill to see their scripts sort of being given, inverted commas, life. So I'm only going by what what my partners in crime say. But yeah.
Are you drawing for a certain audience in your mind's eye, or are you drawing for yourself?
No, I draw for myself. I think if you try, I think most people would say this. If you try and please a certain demographic, you're onto a losing streak, aren't
Mm-hmm.
you? So no, I always say it's better to draw for more, than for thousands of people than it is to draw for a couple of people. I don't do many commissions at all, primarily because I don't like the idea of pleasing that one person,
Mm.
because then the pressure's on to please one person. Whereas, when you're drawing for a comic that might sell, I don't know, for the sake of argument, 40,000 copies, you know going in, you're not going to please 40,000 people at the same time. So
Right.
you might as well do what pleases you
Right.
and hope that at least half of those 40,000 people will quite like what you do. And then the best work comes out of it, because it's your thing. It's what you've wanted to do.
That's what the audience really wants. They want to find out what it is that makes you tick, and then they get turned on by that. Usually, if you've done good work, which most of the time you have. Do you ever come across stories that come your way that stump you, that you can't get a vision on them? Does that ever happen?
No, I know it sounds crazy. I don't think I've ever had a kind of. I mean, there's been storytelling challenges.
Like, give us an example. What's a
Oh
storytelling
God.
challenge?
I mean, most of the challenges, it sounds awful, come from a writer not knowing their craft as well as they should,
Okay.
just because they're saying, giving a character two things to do, but it's in one panel, something like that. And you go, well, I'm going to have to split this panel in half, because you can't show that and that happening, at the same time. That's not comics.
Well, that's like trying to give an actor a direction that has two totally separate emotional moments in one, and they can't do
Yes.
it. They can't do it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So a bit of it comes from that. I can't really think of an example beyond that.
Well, that's a good example. I mean, that makes sense. If somebody writes a script and they give it to you, and it's instructing you to do two separate things in one panel, well, how could you do it?
Well, it's impossible. I mean, I tend to, like I say, I tend to just rough out the page anyway and add an extra panel, and just say, look, I've divided this up into two panels because it makes the storytelling a lot clearer. But it's a fairly obvious thing to say, but I don't think sometimes comic book artists tend to ignore it. But story is king at the end of the day.
I have said for a very long time that the greatest special effect in movies is great storytelling.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And that's the same for you, isn't it?
Yeah, great storytelling, great characters, which sort of goes in with the same
Same,
thing. If you're
hand in
not
hand,
invested
sure.
in either of those, you're just, what's the point?
Well, that's what's drawing the audience in. So it draws you in. You're part of the audience. I'm part of the audience. And if we're drawn in, then there's a chance that others are drawn into it. Do you ever also write the stories that you draw, or are you always just drawing?
No, I can't write. It's as simple as that. I'd freely admit that. No, I've never had sort of inspiration to do so. Never really come up with an idea that I thought, oh, I could write this or whatever.
Have you ever come up with an idea and gave it to someone else to write for you?
Yes, twice, but the very bare bones of an idea. Once was the book called White Death. I remember approaching Robbie Morrison, my friend that wrote that, and Robbie and I go way, way back. We've known each other for decades. And I said to Robbie at the time, I said, I'd really like to do a book set in World War One, and I want to do it in these specific materials, which at the time was charcoal and chalk on grey paper, which was quite sort of experimental, obviously. But that was because I'd just finished my run on the X-Files and
Right.
hadn't had a particularly great experience with that. So I kind of wanted to almost go completely the other way and do something quite experimental. And then Robbie came up with the story of White Death because of that. So that was great. And my most recent project, which was Altamont, that again was myself talking to the writer and saying, I really want to do a book, hopefully set in the 60s, because I want to do something along those lines. I've never done anything historically set in that time period. And I want to do something about music, and preferably could we set it at a festival. So and I think I came up with doing it was more detailed than that. It was I had decided I wanted to do Altamont because I was quite interested in sort of the end of the 60s and how the hippie ideal was sort of basically destroyed by that and the Manson murders, and I kind of thought the Manson murders had been done to death, no pun intended. Whereas Altamont, was the lesser known of the two. That
Right.
was always the significant sort of end of it all.
Was it then fictionalized? I've not read Altamont, so I don't know. Is it fictionalized?
Oh no! Well, Altamont? Have you heard of Altamont?
Sure, of
The
course.
actual We're telling a fictional story against the backdrop of the Altamont Festival.
Got it. That was the Hells Angels, right?
Yeah, that's the one. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't want to do Altamont the story because doing music in comics is probably the hardest thing to do because there's no sound in comics.
Yes, that makes it challenging to have no sound and be about music.
Exactly. So you've got to sort of do something else to make it work. So we figured out that the best thing to do was to tell the story about another group of kids that go to the Altamont Festival and have their own sort of, shall we say, Heart of Darkness story that goes on with the backdrop of Altamont going on. So you're constantly cutting back to the certain events happening, but it's more background. And it's great because then you don't really need to concentrate. I've always wanted to do a book about music, but not specifically like lots of shots of bands or whatever playing, because again, that just seems just something that doesn't work in comics.
No, music does not usually take a still image. You can get really beautiful images, photographs, and so on of a musician playing, but you're not going to get much story out of it.
No, exactly. And actually the visuals, if anyone out there that they want to Google, Altamont, the visuals speak for themselves anyway, because, it was, visually, it was a hell of a thing.
So
it's just mad. This almost 200,000 people free festival where there's a stage where you've got the general public just hanging around on the stage, and it's insane.
It is insane.
Yeah, absolutely insane. The bands must have felt so claustrophobic on those stages.
Well, it would never happen today. It was something that they'd get nowhere near there today.
No.
Does that require a lot of research on your part before you start to draw?
Yeah, I mean, my last few projects actually have all been very, very research heavy. Heretic as well, which was written with my friend Robbie as well, which was a book set in 16th century Antwerp, all
Wow.
about the sort of the Spanish Inquisition and witch trials and things like that. So obviously a lot of research required for that one. I mean, originally Robbie and I were making plans to actually go to Antwerp and take photographs and stuff, but unfortunately we started the book around about early 2020.
Well, what
And
happened
a
then,
certain little
Charlie?
thing happened in 2020 which prevented us from
Just a
from
tiny
going
worldwide
abroad.
pandemic.
So,
Yeah.
I had to rely on a lot of Google image search, unfortunately, with stuff like that. And yeah, Altamont, same. I mean, I'm very, again, it all goes back to my love of French bande dessinée as well, because, the big difference between the European comics industry and the American stroke British comics industry is the Americans rely on sort of impact and big visuals and sort of action and that sort of stuff. Whereas, I'm very much talking in general terms here, but whereas the French industry sort of relies more, it's calmer. It relies more on a sense of place. So there's a lot more research done, things like that. I mean, just goes to, if you think of the comparison between going way back, as I was talking about, between Asterix and the Marvel comics I was reading at the same time, the difference is incredible. As cartoony as Asterix was, the research in it is just unbelievable. And all the backgrounds are impeccably researched, and I kind of love that. So Altamont, which originally was a bande dessinée comic, it was French. It will be actually next in December. It's finally coming out in English from Image Comics.
Nice.
So there will be an English translation. It's a bit weird telling an American story, but
It's not the first time, and the Americans have told lots of stories from all over the world that have nothing to do with America. So it
no,
works that way.
absolutely.
Storytelling
Absolutely.
is storytelling, isn't it, Charlie? It's people in conflict with other people or their circumstances. That's what it boils down to in almost all great, memorable, popular storytelling. And it's, in your case, you're famous for having drawn a comic book for a long time, the series The Walking Dead, in which it's ordinary people in extraordinary circumstances, not
Yes.
superheroes, but normal people that become heroic.
Yes, absolutely. Well, that's why I did it. It's as simple as that. I remember, I can't say there was no way I had the foresight to see how big it would become. But when Robert first asked me whether I'd like to draw this little zombie comic, as we referred to it at the time, I was in between jobs. So, I was a journeyman artist at the time. So I kind of just, went with it and said, yeah, okay, I guess I'll do that for a bit. And then when I got the first issue, the first script to the first issue that I was going to draw, I remember thinking, oh, this is a bit different. This is not just zombie mayhem. And I think if it was literally just zombie mayhem, we might have lasted 12 issues, maximum 24
Sure.
or something like that.
Sure.
And then we'd have been done. People have lost interest. So, the whole point of The Walking Dead was exactly as what you said. It's ordinary people in extraordinary circumstances, which just happens to be the zombie apocalypse. I've always said, it's the biggest MacGuffin in the book are the zombies.
Well, the zombies are just the backdrop at this point, and they started off, they were important, but now they're still important as an impediment for your characters to get to their goal. But
it's to get the characters from A to B.
Yeah.
It's as simple as that.
So forgive me if I use a term. I don't mean it to be insulting in any way, shape, or form. But from a storytelling perspective, it's kind of like a zombie soap opera.
Yeah. Well, it is. I mean, Marvel Comics, they're soap operas.
That's absolutely right. It's characters with all these extraordinary things happening to them. And what it boils down to is, how do they resolve whatever the objective is that they're trying to get to, whatever that goal is. And so a serialized story like The Walking Dead becomes one goal after another after another. What's interesting to me about The Walking Dead is I never ever, because I've watched every episode of every one of the series as well, and I still to this day don't know what the ultimate goal is beyond survival. But that's an important goal, to stay alive. And so there's all these obstacles in the way. That's what the storytelling is for me in that show and in what you created. Can you think of a goal beyond that that's in there beyond survival?
I'm sure, surely to survive is
It's
everyone's
every
is everyone's ultimate goal. Yeah, it's just they're a bit more precious about survival as we might be. Well, no, it just, and of course, sticking them in that sort of situation heightens the emotion as well. So
Well, so now there's lots of death, obviously. It's called The Walking Dead, and there's a lot of dead people walking around. And by the way, I'm talking to you from Pittsburgh, which is the beginning of the zombie apocalypse, basically, through
yes,
George
the
Romero.
Romero's hometown.
Absolutely correct. And I've met George, never worked with him, but have met him. And so I'm just curious, what is it when you read that, when you read Robert Kirkman's work, what was it about the death part of it that attracted you? It's a weird question, but you spent a lot of time drawing death.
It didn't attract me. I know it sounds crazy. That's the thing that didn't attract me. I was never a. Always sounds slightly disingenuous when I say this, but I was never a big zombie fan before The Walking Dead, or even after it. I mean, I like horror movies as much as I like dramas or sci-fi or whatever. I've watched my fair share of zombie movies. I'm a child of the, kind of in the UK anyway, of the video nasty generation, so I watched a lot of gory zombie movies
Sure.
in my late teens, but I didn't perceive them as oh, great, I'm going to draw zombies for the next X number of years,
It didn't turn
Um,
you off, but it wasn't something that drew you in either.
no, and people expect me to be this amazing zombie expert as well, just because I've drawn them for so long, and I'm not. It's as simple as that. And look, don't get me wrong; it's not like I don't like drawing them at all. But like I said to you at the beginning, as we both agreed, they are literally a way of getting the characters from A to B,
Sure.
and it's kind of that. The apocalypse could have been any apocalypse. It just happened to be a zombie apocalypse.
They are a source of what is indispensable in great storytelling, and that's conflict. They
Yes.
are a source of conflict. And because it is in the title of the entire series, you have to keep coming back to those characters.
We have to put in the old zombie here and again, here and there. Yes.
and people are freaked out about them, so that it keeps bringing people back to go, what's going to happen? How's that going to work? How are they going to survive? So that's exactly what it is.
There is actually a moment in The Walking Dead, and I can't remember what issue precisely, but we're probably about 2/3 of the way into the whole run, where the characters do actually have a discussion amongst themselves about actually the zombies aren't that much of a threat anymore because we're all so good at killing them.
It's true.
That they aren't. They literally have that conversation. And Robert has certain ways of all ways of surprising us with various sort of confrontations with zombies. They're never just kind of put out to pasture. That's it. But there is an element where they become less of a threat, actually.
We, the audience, though, we get thrown for curves, loops, because occasionally someone that we're invested in does get bit and winds up dead, and that throws us for a loop.
Yeah, that's the drama, isn't it? I mean, it's always great to have a drama where you're never sure who's going to survive as well.
Well, that's it.
I mean, that's great drama. We're now, well, thanks to not just streaming, but TV channels like, I don't know, the original HBO and things like that, where suddenly TV shows didn't cease to become, the episode of the week and the case was solved, or the monster of the week, and all the characters remained unchanged, and there's never any kind of threat to the core characters, which added less drama to the whole thing when you knew A, B, and C were just going to live to the end of whatever. Now you're in a completely different landscape where you're really not sure who's going to, and it only takes a TV show or a comic or whatever it is to kill off a core character in the most unexpected way. Hitchcock was the first to do it, wasn't he? So which utterly throws you off course, doesn't
So
it?
this is all about cliffhangers and drawing you into the next episode, the next book, whatever it would be. That's where you're keeping the audience coming back, and that I think goes back to Dickens and Penny Dreadful novels, where you get stopped at the end of this week's episode. What's going to happen next? So that's part of where it goes back to. But yes, it's now more open ended, and you don't know who's going to make it, and that I think is what people really get drawn in by. How hard was it for you to stick with drawing The Walking Dead for 16 years? How did you keep at it?
Well, I know it sounds crazy to say it, but it seemed quite easy just to keep doing
Wow.
it. I used to moan to all my contemporaries and stuff that I'm never been put on a regular series because I'd be really good on a regular series because I'm very efficient, I'm very fast, or was anyway. I've kind of, my lifestyle is a bit, I'm a routine sort of guy, so it all fits in with my kind of the way I work, the way I live. So as soon as I got on The Walking Dead, obviously it was brilliant because I had a regular thing. It's testament to Robert's writing. The man can write amazing stories, and he just kept pulling me in. The odd time I might have thought, oh, this is all getting a bit stale, he'd do something which would just pull me back in again. So it's testament to how great the characters were, how great the plots were, and also I know it sounds crazy because a lot of people can't believe this when I say it, but I generally would do, I had to do 22 pages a month plus a cover. And I found it quite easy. I always had spare time.
Wow.
It wasn't like I was working and burning the, sort of both ends of the candle or whatever and just working 18 hours a day just trying to get this thing done. That's probably a good reason why I kept doing it as well, because it wasn't that hard.
So it stayed fresh for you.
Yeah, it stayed fresh, and there were certain techniques I used as well that kept things moving at a pace.
Like what?
Well, two things mainly. We got about 20 issues in when I suddenly reduced the page size, because generally speaking, most comic book artists draw double size up because that's just what you do. And obviously this is pre-digital when I started The Walking Dead, so I'm physically drawing it. I reduced the size. I literally drew almost to the same size as the comic art, 20 odd issues in, something like that, to save time. Literally less space to fill.
Right.
It's a practical thing. and the other thing I used to do was I'm very, sort of goes with my kind of routine-y sort of personality. I literally started from page 1, worked through to page 22. Top left, work to bottom right. I never deviated that. I think that keeps the story flowing. But also, as soon as I finished a page, I'd put it away. I wouldn't look at it again.
Ever?
Yes, and regret it because the next time I look at it, it'd be printed. So, yeah, that's how you have to do it, though. I'm sure you say the same thing with writing scripts for animation shows.
So you're not a revisionist. You don't draw something and then come back and revise or eliminate something or take a panel out or add a panel. That's not how you operate.
Well, I do more now, obviously, because I'm in a nice, lucky position that I can afford to do it. But back then, no, I wasn't a revisionist, so to speak. But that was because of the practicalities of doing 22 pages every month. And I just knew if I just put it aside, because if you don't put it aside, you're just going to constantly go back and refine it. And there's just not the time to refine it at all. At the end of the day, when you're doing a regular comic book like that, as much as an art form it is, it's still the comic book industry,
Sure.
and you've got to deliver. And you've also got to remember that 99.5% of people that are going to read your book aren't that fussed about the artwork in terms of, whether this head's too big on this character, or do you know what I mean? All the
Right.
stuff that you would refine and go back and adjust because you just don't like the technique you've used on it, or you don't like this figure's a bit wrong, or whatever. So you've got to accept the fact that most people think you're an utter genius.
But I'm going to guess you don't think you're a genius.
No, I don't. I'm far from a genius. I think the word genius is used very lightly often.
I think, and you correct me if I'm wrong, I think most artists, and I'm talking about all forms of art, dancers, choreographers, writers, etc. I believe most artists, as they work, know where all of the seams are and know where all the mistakes are, and they see it, and the people that are observing it as an audience, they're not noticing any of it. They're just seeing
No,
the
of course
finished
not.
work. So you feel like my work's not perfect. It's not that great. I know what I did, and it took me a while to do it, and I made these mistakes, and I got there, and I'm okay with it. I think most artists are like that, don't you think?
Yeah, I think if I did the perfect page, I'd give up.
That's
Well, no, seriously, because I think the reason we, as creative people, and like I say, I'm referring to literally everyone in
right,
the creative
right.
industries. I think if you get to a point, the whole point you carry on is because you want to achieve that almost unachievable goal.
Sure.
That's your inspiration. You want to constantly get better and get better and get better, and then get to a certain point where you just go, well, that's it. I've done it. I've achieved my perfect whatever you've achieved.
Then your life is over.
Your life is over. Where do you go from the perfect page? I mean, no one achieves it. That's the thing.
It's all about the journey to get to that. It's that
Exactly. That's what makes it so fun.
I agree with you. So, all right, tell me a little bit about some of your original stuff. You've already told us about Altamont and Heretic and so on. Do you find that to be more fulfilling because it's your original stuff rather than you're working under someone else's shingle, so to speak?
Yeah. Well, I mean, my career literally is divided into two completely separate parts, really. There's obviously pre-Walking Dead and post-Walking Dead. I mean, basically, The Walking Dead, because that was obviously creator owned anyway, has enabled me to, kick back, relax, shall we say.
Sure.
I'll never not be busy because I love doing what I do. It's as simple as that. But
So to you, it's not a job, is it? It's just what you do.
I am at my most relaxed when I'm sat here drawing.
There you go.
It's as simple as that. Yeah. So no, it's not a job. I love doing it. Yeah. I wouldn't do it. It's not the sort of thing you do to torture yourself. Yeah, I could think of much easier things to do. But so post Walking Dead, I found myself in the enviable position that I could just pick and choose what I wanted to do.
Mhm.
So why would I want to do other people's characters? People always ask me, especially in the American sort of comic book industry, they will say, what character would you like to work on next or whatever? And I just go, well, my own. It's as simple as that. I'm not interested in, I'd really like to do Spider-Man, or, I've sort of done that anyway.
Right.
And that's where I get the most, how I'm most fulfilled. It's just owning your own stuff, but you get to create everything then, and you own it, which is, and I'm not talking about in just a monetary way in terms of, we could have a Hollywood deal here or whatever. It's just great because you're in complete control of what you do with it. And you never are with obviously other people's characters. That's why in our industry, you get, if you work for especially if you work for the two big American companies, Marvel and DC, you get paid rather relatively handsomely, especially if you're fast. per page because they're basically paying you off.
Yes, they are.
That's what they're doing. They're just saying, well, we'll give you all this money, but you've got absolutely no claim on what you've just drawn. It's as simple as that. So you go, okay, I accept that. You can't really not accept, so you have to just go with it. I mean, what was it? A couple of years ago, I did, less than a couple of years ago, I did what they call a Batman black and white, which is, I can't remember which Batman comic it is now. But they kind of go in the back as a backup strip to certain Batman comics. And it says what it says on the tin, just black and white. So it's kind of perfect for me. And yeah, I've drawn Batman before. He's one of the people I do sort of enjoy drawing. But it was 8 pages long. And when I finished it, I thought, yep, that's just about as much Batman as I'd like to do.
You got your fill of Batman in 8 pages.
Yeah, I got it. That's it. I don't want to commit any more than that. I don't want to commit, a year, 2 years of my life. That sounds awfully fatalistic, this, but I will be 60 next year, and in the twilight of my career.
You're still a very young man with a long way to go. I have to ask you about the cosmic rays. You're also a musician, and you're a drummer. And
Yes.
I don't know if anybody's ever said this to you before or not. Perhaps they have. Perhaps you've thought it yourself. But I think the fact that you're a drummer shows up in your artwork.
Oh, okay, interesting.
Because
okay.
there is a rhythm and a beat to the way that you lay out the imagery and the way that things come out on a page. It has, it's not a drum beat like thing, but there's a rhythm to it. And as a drummer, you obviously have to have pretty good rhythm. How long have you been drumming? Since you were a kid?
I picked up proper drumsticks around about 16, 17. A friend of mine, when I was at school, I was always kind of envious of people that were in bands at school. And he's my oldest friend, actually. He played, he was a multi-instrumentalist. I think he was learning violin at school, but he could play guitar and keyboards and things as well. His family were really musical. And he just saw me just tapping away. I used to tap away at my desk all the time, to music. And he said, well, why don't you come to the school music buildings and we can sit at the school kit and see if you can hit it right. And I kind of sat down and I could instantly do a very basic beat. So within 2 weeks, I was in a band with him,
Wow.
Just doing. Funny enough, it ties in with the creator-owned stuff. I've always been in bands that do original material as well. Even from that age, we were writing songs and.
Do you think that your music influences your drawing and your drawing influences your music?
I think, if they do, it's very slight. I've never noticed. I mean, after just saying what I just said about, I've always been in original bands, and I'm sat here advocating for, sort of creator-owned material. I'm thinking, there's a similarity there. Something I'm interesting. I've never been interested. Well, I've done the odd covers band, but it's always been very light and sort of temporary. It's always been with a goal for doing a gig or something like that, and then that's it. But yeah, interestingly, it's kind of, why would I just be interested in original stuff as I'm also interested in, original comic book material. So, I mean, beyond that, it's interesting you say you've noticed the rhythmical patterns to my storytelling. I've never noticed myself, but I think it's one thing, perhaps a person that's obviously a bit more objective
I
would notice.
As soon as I saw in your bio that you were a drummer, it then became very obvious to me in the drawings that you make that there is a rhythm and a pattern to it, especially in the multi-panel stuff where you're working some kind of action out over multiple panels. I think that the rhythm, the beats feel very natural and musical in the way that you do it. So I think that that's that's evident. Now, I might not have guessed that. I might not have guessed, oh, he's a drummer. But once I knew you were a drummer, then I could see it.
Right. I'll take that.
Well, you should. I'm curious. You've been a collaborator your entire career in both art and in music. What makes a good collaboration work?
Personalities. Oh God, look, yeah, I'm now coming up with connections. Now you've said all this sort of stuff, I'm now coming up with connections between music and comics. Now, yeah, both
Sure.
of them are collaborations as well.
Yes.
I can't do either without somebody else involved.
There you go.
Especially as a drummer. I mean, we are the most reliant on other people than any other member of a band. Yeah, that's kind of interesting. Yeah, sorry, I forgot what was the question. Well,
The question is, what makes a good collaboration
oh
work?
yeah. I think yeah, just personalities. Well, funnily enough, going back to playing music, I always used to think, the best bands to be in as a collaborator were where you share similar tastes in music. But actually, I've been proven so wrong so many times, because the best bands I've been in are the ones where we've all gotten on as friends the best. There's just been really good sort of connection with the people, rather than, oh, we all like the same music, so therefore, let's just, because at the same time, when you're just in a band because you all like the same music, what sort of music are you going to produce the same as the music you like, which isn't that exciting. But if you're in a band with a group of people you just enjoy the company of, but we've all got, different tastes or slightly different tastes or whatever, the actual sound that comes out is a lot more interesting, because it's a combination of all these other different influences. And it's probably the same with comics. My interestingly, Robert and I share very different tastes in our comic book influences. Now, I don't know whether that's because of our age, because I'm over 10 years older than he is. So he's come up through a different sort of, bunch of comics than I have, and yet we have formed this, amazing 16-year partnership. And we certainly didn't split up acrimoniously or anything like that. We just finished the book because that's what we wanted to do right from the beginning.
Sure.
And we still talk, and who knows, we might work together again at some point in the future. That's no big spoiler. I'm just let's not.
The door is open.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. We still chat occasionally. It's not like we never talk. So yeah, there's kind of core values there, I think, in a good collaboration. But at the end of the day, it's getting on as people.
It needs to be frictionless in some way. Yes.
Oh, of course. Yeah. But there again, a nice bit of friction always pays dividends, doesn't it? That's the art of collaboration, surely.
Well, that's that old cliche that it takes a grain of sand irritating the oyster to make a pearl. So has to be a little bit of friction, but not a lot of friction. Too much friction means people are going to run away from each other, but a little bit sparks, innovation or creation or whatever. I think I think what you're saying is absolutely right, that it's people having to get along. It's like a marriage. You were in a work marriage with Robert Kirkman for 16 years.
Absolutely. Yeah. Through all the trials and tribulations. Yeah, there were, there was never a time where we were shouting at each other, but there was a couple of times, inevitably, after 16 years, where things got, not, I wouldn't even say heated, but, there was a kind of slightly aggravating situations here and there, just literally one or two, but God, it's not bad for.
I don't know how anybody goes 16 years and not has a disagreement of some kind.
Absolutely. Yeah. And probably at the end of it, I think something better emerged out of the disagreement.
And there you go. Well, I have been having so much fun for a little more than an hour now talking to Charlie Adlard about his work and the process that he uses to create and the way that he thinks. I think this has been absolutely fantastic. And we're going to wind the show down just a little bit. And I'm just wondering, you've told us a huge number of really great stories along the way, but can you share with us a story throughout your career that's either been weird, quirky, offbeat, strange, or just plain funny?
Well, I mean, I work in the comics industry, so shall we say the fans are unique in their own little way, and God bless them for it, because I'm bloody unique as well in my own little way as well. So, I completely come from their same perspective. So, yeah, I know it sounds crazy to say it, but there's never been a time where I've like a real hair-raising moment or anything like that. I do recall quite recently, though, a moment. I was in Helsinki doing a big show a while back, literally earlier this year, and I was doing all my. I'm a big Greenpeace supporter, so I was sat with a person from Greenpeace then, because we were sort of doing everything for that organisation. So I had someone to talk to throughout a rather empty show, and but this one guy came up to me and he had a load of stuff, and he didn't say a word. He just sort of spread it all out in front of me, very, very precisely. And I sort of looked at him, and of course, they all speak brilliant English there, but you're never 100% sure. But so I sort of looked at him and went, sign all these? Yes? Like this. And he didn't say anything. He just sort of vaguely nodded. So dutifully signed everything. And then he just silently gathered it all up again. Took a long time, sort of go, and then just walked off. And I just turned to my pal at Greenpeace, and we just went, "What the hell was that?" And he was just like, "Whoa!" He's just like, so. I mean, I've had numerous little encounters like that where you just think, "Wow, that was just really, really." I mean, there was a guy. I mean, this is quite endearing. I have a mega fan in France, like a super fan, who literally buys everything I do. And when I say everything, not just comics, anything I will draw on, he'll either get or anyway. First time I met him, I've met him a few times when I've been in France, and there's an amazing show in France called Angoulême, which is the biggest show in France, and it's great because it's literally pure comic books, and mainly it's 90% bande dessinée as well. But it attracts over 100,000 people. It's massive, and it's in this small town, and it's all about comic books. Imagine that. Anyway, so the last time I was at Angoulême, this guy came up to me, and I hadn't met him before. And the first thing he spreads out were 4 coasters that I'd illustrated literally the Christmas before, because there's a local arts centre that I'm a patron of here back in town, and every year I do a Christmas card or something like that for them to it's obviously make a bit more money for them because it's a charity. And last year I did the bridges of Shrewsbury, because we're on this river and it loops around town, so we've got quite a few bridges. So I did that, and they said to me, "Oh, we're going to do a print, we'll do some cards, and we'll probably even try and do some coasters." I was like, "Okay, cool." And they said to me afterwards, "Oh, we sold out all the coasters. Even there's been even a couple have been bought by people not in the UK." I was like, "Oh, great." And of course, what happens? I go all the way to Angoulême. The first thing this guy sort of spreads out these 4 coasters, and I'm like, "The bridges of Shrewsbury? Where the hell did you get these from?" And of course, his English was a bit broken, but he said, "Oh, I got them from this website." And I was like, "All right." And then he was in my queue every day. Angoulême's a 4-day show, and you have a set number. You sort of sign at your publisher. It's slightly different to US shows. and there's a set number of people queue. He was there literally every day with something, as much as he was allowed to bring every day. And since then, I've sort of known him as my massive French fan. But yeah, it's just weird to see the weirdest stuff put in front of you, where you just don't expect. You think this stuff you've done years ago has just gone into the ether, and you'll never see it again.
Right.
Suddenly it rears its ugly head.
And there it is again. I had the great privilege of spending 80 minutes interviewing William Shatner on stage in front of a huge crowd. And, there's the prime example of fans that come out of the woodwork at a guy forever. He doesn't remember what he did 50 years ago on Star Trek, but they're all asking him questions about it. That's kind of what you're talking about, where they're bringing stuff up that you've probably forgotten about. Yeah.
Oh, totally. It's always quite surprising. I mean, that was probably the biggest surprise. I mean, loads of people come up and they've got an old comic and stuff, and you just sort of go, I haven't seen that for a while, sort of thing. But a bunch of bloody coasters.
And you signed them, I assume.
Of course. Yeah, anything.
Well, that's the fans are. God bless the fans, as you say. We really need the fans.
Yeah.
So, all right, last question for you today, Charlie. You've given out a pretty significant amount of advice throughout this whole show, just on how to think about the way to be in this business. But I'm wondering if you have a solid piece of advice or tip that you like to give to those who are starting out, or maybe they're in a little bit trying to get to that next level.
I think the biggest bit of advice, especially in probably my industry, because it's so relatively small, is it's always good still to go to various events, conventions and things like that. You might not meet an editor or something like that, but you might, to be in the very presence of fellow creatives, especially if you're only skilled in, like I am, in the one discipline, you need a writer to work with, for instance, or vice versa. So as great as it is to have obviously social media and the internet and everything nowadays to broaden your work and get it seen more, which obviously I didn't, but I was very lucky when I was breaking in that American comic books were huge at the time.
Right.
So all the major companies in America could afford to send their editors to the few conventions we had in the UK, basically to cherry pick from creatives to come and work for, whether Marvel, DC or whoever. And I saw the benefit of that, the benefit of, excuse the phrase, pressing the flesh, basically,
Sure.
Because to make eye contact, I think, with a potential employer, collaborator, is infinitely better than some random email, social media post or whatever it might be, because you get a proper idea of whether that person is interested or not. And I do think a lot of people kind of ignore that and try and make it sat there solo in their studio and whatever it is, and just hope and pray that somebody might notice their latest post or whatever. And don't get me wrong, I'm sure it's worked in the past for certain people, but generally speaking, I think you remember people. Obviously talent obviously is quite useful as well, but if you meet somebody that's personable and talented, you will remember them, and you will probably go to more of an effort, as an editor or another fellow creative, to see them through to achieve what they want to do, rather than just some sort of random guy on the internet saying, do you want to read my script, sort of thing, So I still think that's really important. And you've got to be good. And you've got to be committed. Commitment is, sorry, I know it's a really obvious thing to say, but commitment, if you really want to do something like this, you've got to, A, love it, and B, you don't just draw for an hour a week. You've got to keep drawing, draw. But you will draw because you love drawing. So, the one thing fuels the other, hopefully. If one of them isn't, perhaps not be in this industry and look for something else.
I think that's two pieces of very wise advice, and they're kind of linked a little bit if you think about it, because the people who are drawing sometimes become shy and inward and don't want to go meet people at events or conventions or wherever. But you have to, because that's the business of being in the business. And if you
Absolutely.
don't press the flesh, and meeting people in person, there's no substitute for it. This conversation we're having is over the internet, and it's lovely to see you, but it would be very different were we in the same studio together. It would be a
Yeah.
different vibe. And so I think that's extremely wise advice. You've got to keep doing your business of being a writer, an artist, a painter, or whatever it is that you are, but you also have to be able to get out and make the business work.
Absolutely, Steve.
Well, I think that's just truly tremendous advice. Charlie Adlard, I cannot thank you enough for being on the show with me today. I can't thank you enough for your time, your energy, and for all this wonderful wisdom, and for this tremendous art that you've left the world. I thank you kindly.
Oh, thank you. Well, my ego is full to the brim now. Thank you, Steve.
And so we've come to the end of today's Story Beat. If you like this episode, won't you please take a moment to give us a comment, rating, or review on whatever app or platform you're listening to. Your support helps us bring more great Story Beat episodes to you. Story Beat is available on all major podcast apps and platforms, including Apple Podcasts, YouTube, Spotify, iHeartRadio, TuneIn, and many others. Until next time, I'm Steve Cuden, and may all your stories be unforgettable.